Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 29 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. And today we've got quite an interesting assortment of species. We've got quite a few marine animals in our lagoons, but we've got quite a few mammals today and a few fish, which is quite fun to look at, and even a reptile. I do not love reptiles. But we're going to be starting off today. We've got Jasurba's Hippo pack, so we're going to have a look at a few different species of hippos. And this taxonomy is a little bit confusing, as I'll explain, but we have the Cyprus dwarf hippopotamus, or should be Hippopotamus minor, but this is Pharaonos, for a reason I'll get into. But yeah, let's have a look at these little guys. Let's have a look at this little goobers. All these little goobers. Really cute little fellas. So this is Hippopotamus minor. These guys are also known as the Cyprus dwarf hippopotamus. These guys are an extinct species of hippopotamus that lived in the island of Cyprus, so in the Mediterranean, right until the Holocene. So just a few thousand years ago, these guys were around, which is really, really interesting. These guys, you can see, they're dwarf hippos, so they're much, much smaller than most other hippos. These guys are about 200 kilograms or 440 pounds. And the estimated body length is kind of like 76 centimeters or 2.5 feet tall, and about 4 foot, 121 centimeters long. So this is through a process often that happens to animals that get isolated on islands called insular dwarfism. That's when animals that are large, that includes hippos, elephants, even humans, dinosaurs there's been evidence of dinosaurs such as Europasaurus being affected by insular dwarfism, where animals that are large on the mainland, they move to an island, and since they're so big, there's not enough resources, so they become smaller, and they create some adaptations and have some things like that, become a new species, so they can live on the island. And it's happened over and over time. There's lots of dwarf elephants, dwarf hippos, as we can see here, dwarf dinosaurs, things like that. Really, really interesting ecological process that is pretty interesting to see. So a lot of these adaptations were to live on Cyprus, which is pretty interesting. And genetic evidence shows that their closest relative is actually the modern hippopotamus, or the common hippopotamus. So that's why that's used here. And I think that really gives a lot of interesting stuff about its ecology. It's kind of, because remember, the common hippopotamus used to live in Europe, even in Britain, during like the warmer parts of the Pleistocene. So they managed to get to the island, and then they got isolated during probably an interglacial, and then they basically evolved to survive by being a smaller size and changing a little bit to better fit that ecology of the island. And they believe to have split from the common hippopotamus about 1.3 to 1.5 million years ago, so within the Pleistocene, or like the middle Pleistocene. And they're the smallest of all the insular hippopotamuses that have been found. And the extremely small size of this hippo is in the favor of a middle Pleistocene or even early Pleistocene colonization. And the time of extinction, they only went extinct between 11,000 and 9,000 years ago, so well into the Holocene. The Cyprus dwarf elephant, along with the Cyprus dwarf hippo, were the only large land mammals on the island of Cyprus. And they were a herbivore, like modern hippos, and had no natural predators. And there's been a little analyses to its carpal bones suggest that these guys were much more terrestrial than modern hippopotamus, probably better adapted for living on the rugged terrain of Cyprus, which is pretty interesting. And excavations of Cyprus that provide evidence that these guys may have been driven to extinction by the early human residents, though they have been criticized a lot through their proposal, and potentially could be bones could have accumulated naturally and been a fuel source for people. So it's kind of we really don't know, but it is definitely possible. That's might have been went extinct around the Holocene because people came and killed them all, but it could be very much also climate and things like that, which is quite interesting. Many scientists do maintain the name Pharaonos minor for the Cyprus dwarf hippo, which was named in 1972, based off the remains of Enogus Georgius in Cyprus, which was a chapel that was very rich in bones, and got named after the petrified remains and the Pharaonos, which is a saint, with a Greek Orthodox saint, and according to local myth, actually fled from Syria to escape his prosecutors, but then managed to have been stranded on Cyprus. So that's where they got the original name from. But due to being so closely related to modern hippos, most people maintain they're hippopotamus minor. But I think for the game reason, because there's already the common hippopotamus mod, they added that genus so they could be different animals. But yeah, really, really awesome. And yeah, really, really cool little guys from the Hippo Pack. JWE2 did a really great job with these little hippos. Big, big fan. So let them run off and do their thing. I just want them to get out of here so we can... I still want them to get out of the way. Because they're based on the mini, you can see they're biting the tails and things, but I want them to run off so I can have a look at the next hippo. So next hippo, also done by JWE2, the second one of the Hippo Pack, we have got Hexaprotodon. Hexaprodon, I believe say that, yeah. So Hexaprotodon is a very, very interesting animal. You can see he's still quite a big one. Let's see if we can get him in a little bit better light. There we are. Here is Hexaprodon. Really, really nice fella. Really, really cute. So Hexaprodon is a genus of hippopotamus that's known from Asia. And its name means 6 front teeth, as some fossil forms have 3 pairs of incisors, so that's where they get their name. So basically 6 front teeth. The genus of Hexaprodon originally actually only applied to the pygmy hippopotamus before it was reclassified in the genus Sauropithecus, I believe you say that, which is the genus include African taxa and may have been paraphyletic compared to most species of modern hippopotamus. But the most uncontroversial Asian members of this genus is most likely basically lived in the late Neogene and Quaternary of South and Southeast Asia, so Hexaprodon sylvanensis. And the oldest come from the late Miocene, but they were mostly extinct by the late Middle Pleistocene in Southeast Asia, but survived in Sumatra in the early late Pleistocene. And the final last known populations of Hexaprodon went extinct at the very end of the Pleistocene in India. So they were right until like the last 100,000 years or so in India until they went extinct finally. Hexaprodon lived in India until that terminal Pleistocene, with the latest dates between 16,000 and 50,000 years ago. So right around that time with the Great Pleistocene extinction. And there's been evidence of found in the Narmada River in central India, and the evidence of this late surviving population indicates that they lived during a catastrophic drought, which was caused by an extremely weak Indian monsoon, and it's thought this habitat degradation and fragmentation, along with potentially because obviously the droughts, less water for hippos is a bad thing because hippos really do like water. This extreme drought could have really hurt their populations and potentially driven them to extinction. Or even humans may have given the final coup de grace because the populations were really stressed because of these droughts. And then humans came along and stressed them even more, and they probably just couldn't survive that and went extinct. But there is no evidence of hippopotamus butchery in the Indian subcontinent. And being a hippos are very big, dangerous animals, and these guys were still quite big. I think a lot of people put a little bit too much stock in that idea. But there is quite a few species. The most famous species is kind of Hexaprodon sylvanensis. That's kind of the more famous one, and I believe the latest one. But yeah, really, really awesome animal. Definitely a big fan of these guys. There's lots of different species, but I don't think the taxonomy's been really that well sorted out. But yeah, really, really awesome. Let's watch these guys run off and do their thing. Really, really beautiful Hexaprodon. Okay, so now we're moving on to the lagoons. So we've got our last hippo from the Hippo Pack by JWE2. We've got Santutherium. So this is Sayotherium. Really, really cool little goober. Let's pause and have a look. Based on the plesiosaur, which is quite interesting. And they're floating around. They should be pretty weird to put them in a lagoon, but I think it's still quite cool and see them swimming around. These guys are extinct genus of hippo that were found in the early Pleistocene of Africa, so about 4 or 5 million years ago, and was represented by the single species Sayotherium mingos, or migos, and the earliest fossils appear around the start of the Pleistocene about 4 million years ago. And Sayotherium is, as you can see, is quite similar to the modern pygmy hippopotamus in its size and its morphology, and was quite small. And the elongated shape of its brain case and its relatively large orbit suggest that it's actually got a prominent evolutionary relationship with the pygmy hippopotamus. But truly, we do not know because morphology is not that helpful sometimes. Usually, genetics is a bit helpful. I mean, morphology and genetics work well to really sort out these evolutionary relationships, but typically, one-on-one doesn't really help that much. But really, really cool animal. I do love Sayotherium, and that completes the hippo pack done by Jasurba. And it's cool to see these guys in a lagoon because we know hippos love water, and even pygmy hippos are still quite adept in the water. And really, really cute, even though this lagoon's probably way too big or way too deep for these guys. Let's let them go off and do their own thing. So, next up, we've got some fishies. Who doesn't love some fishies? We have got the white marlin. So we've got here the white marlin. The Atlantic white marlin is kind of what I've used for the information here. Let's see if we can get one. There we are. There's one looking pretty there. So the Atlantic white marlin is a marine pelagic oceanic fish that hangs out between depths of 0 to 150 meters and live in subtropical areas. These guys are typically found in the Atlantic Ocean, from southwestern Atlantic to southeastern Atlantic, and records of the Mediterranean and from kind of Belize. And there's some in France as well. They're considered reduced, and there's 2 separate stocks within, or a single population within that Atlantic. And there's 2 highly migratory species that can be swimming long distances pretty much everywhere, which is pretty interesting. Let's see if you can find anything on the other species. There's some people do consider like a Pacific marlin and a Atlantic marlin, but these guys are mostly found in the Atlantic. I think I mixed up my information a bit. Let me just get back to it. There we are. And in terms of maturity, these guys get about 130 centimeters at maturity, but their largest size can get about 300 centimeters, or about 3 meters, male or unsexed, though a more common length is a little over 2 meters. And they are typically at weight are about 82.5 kilograms. Still quite a big animal. Really, really cool. And you can see they get their characteristic marlin look. They've got very similar to other billfish, like the Indo-Pacific sailfin that we covered before. They've got these long, large dorsal fin here, that long bill there, which they use to help with prey. These large dorsal fins as well, and that shape that allows them to swim very, very fast, because these guys are fast pursuit predators. So they usually live above the thermocline, and their distribution will actually vary a lot seasonally regarding higher latitudes in both southern and northern populations, and they're typically only there during those warm seasons. They're usually found in deep blue water with surface temperatures of over 22 degrees. And the currents of like 0.5 to 2 knots occur over much of their habitat. In terms of their food, they feed typically on fish and squids. And females will typically grow larger than males, and flesh is of excellent quality, and people like hunting marlins or fishing marlins. In terms of their mating behavior, they migrate into subtropical waters to spawn, where they occur, peak spawning occurring in early summer. These spawning areas are typically found in deep and blue oceanic waters, and generally at high temperatures from 20 to 29 degrees. And except for the South Atlantic gyrals, which have and high surface salinities, but that's typically where they like to spawn. Instead, they are considered vulnerable. They are a predator in the ecosystem. They come with a lot of the issues that come with being a predator in the ecosystem, so like depletion of fish stocks, also being a game fish. People do like them as a game fish, though that's minor commercial as well. Overfishing, as well. Bycatch is another big thing as well. For every 1 pound of target fish you get 5 pounds of bycatch, which is really not good, and things like that. But yeah, really, really awesome fish. How can you not love the white marlin? This guy was also ported over by Leaf and Luca, and it was ported the next animal as well, as we will get into. Really, really beautiful animals here. So let them swim off and do their thing. Then we'll move on to our next guy here. We've got next here the giant oarfish, another really cool fish done by Leaf and Luca. I'm really excited to have a look at this guy. So these guys go over a few other names, also the king of herons, the ribbon fish, or the streamer fish. There's a couple of the other names these guys are known by, which is pretty interesting. They are the world's longest bony fish, and they have, as you can see here, this kind of long ribbon shape with these long fins and a dorsal fin that goes along their entire length. And they often got these oar-shaped pectoral fins where they get their name, the oarfish. And they don't actually swim like this in real life. This is just because the rig was put on. But in real life, they kind of swim with undulating swimming mode of their fins there, almost like a weird eel. And they typically are found more upright, which was very, very creepy. But really, really cool. They were first discovered in 1772. And the name Regalis means belonging to a king. And the scientific name Glennis is from a farm in Glenstair, which was not far from the Norway's second largest city, where the type specimen was found. And the king of herring's nickname comes from its crown-like appearance here, and that's where they get that name, the king of herrings, because it almost looks like a crown. They also have a worldwide distribution, so they can be found pretty much everywhere. They've been found in tropical... They're most commonly found in tropical and middle latitudes, but they can be found pretty much everywhere in the oceans, as long as it's not too cold. They've been characterized as oceandromius, following their primary food source, which is things like krill and small fish. They're basically just small things. They are filter feeders. And they're thought to inhabit the epipelagic sunlit zone and to the dimly lit mesopelagic zones, and can range as deep as 1,000 meters or 3,300 feet below the surface of the ocean, which is really, really cool. As I mentioned, though, as well, they have the longest bony fish with the records of 8 meters, but there have been records of even some getting up to 11 meters, but they're most commonly at about 3 meters, so some pretty large ones. And few have been identified in situ, especially the larvae, and the larvae kind of have this elongated body with the long ray fins, things like that. And you can also see they also have this long ribbon-like shape with the red dorsal fins and things like that. And the first 10 to 12 dorsal fins, as you kind of see there, kind of create this long crown where they get their name, the king of herrings. And they also have 33 to 47 gill rakers and no teeth, so that allows them to filter. The organs of the giant oarfish are actually concentrated towards the head end of the body, enabling them to actually lose portions of their tail, which is really interesting. They also have no swim bladder, and the liver is orange to red because of the exoxytin in a diet. And the lateral line begins from below their eyes and it extends to the lower third of their body and extends to the caudal tip. So we don't know too much about their life cycle. We know a bit from like the artificial insemination work done in laboratories. This work was typically performed, and post-fertilization, the eggs took about 18 days to hatch into larvae, and the larvae were quite similar to other lab-deformed fish, and they face down with their pectoral fins. But these larvae died 4 days later, so the study spanned only that early life cycle of the species. In the field, they're known to typically spawn from July to December, and the resulting eggs are about 2.5 millimeters or about 0.1 inches long, and they float near the surface, and its larvae have been observed near the surface during this season. We don't know too much about the behavior though, but they've been observed swimming with their dorsal fin and also swimming in a vertical position is what we typically find them in. And there's been like videos of them, and it's really, really creepy, but they're such cool animals. And as I mentioned, they feed on krill and filter feeding and things like that. And they are a really interesting animal. They're not really fished commercially, but they are kind of caught as bycatch a lot. And due to their long size and elongated bodies and their large size, elongated body, things like that, they are often considered responsible for most sea serpent myths, although there could be many other explanations, including whale penises, which is quite a fun one. They were formerly considered quite rare, but they're now considered actually quite common. It's just that we don't see them a lot in their habitat because not many people live down 100 meters down to the bottom of the ocean, so, and not people are down there very often, so that's kind of why we don't know too much about these guys, sadly. But they seem to be a quite common animal in the ecosystem, hopefully, though hopefully that doesn't change much, because they're such a beautiful animal, and I hope that we get to see more of these guys. So really, really cool, really, really cool. So let these guys swim off and do their thing. So penultimate animal, we're moving on. The white marlin and the giant oarfish were done by Leaf and Luca. Next one was just ported over by Leaf. We've got Gyptosuchus, I mean. Let these guys swim off and do their thing. Here we are. So let's have a look at you, you big beautiful boy. Well, you got one up there. But have a look at you. You look slightly nicer. You got a nicer position. But we've got Cryptosuchus. So these guys are extinct genus of graveloid crocodilians. So they are related to the modern gharial and false gharial. These fossils have been found typically around Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, and the Amazon. And this genus typically lived throughout the Miocene epoch. And one recently described species of Gyptosuchus, which is probably the one based on here because it's so big, Gyptosuchus korzatzi, grew to an estimated length of about 10 meters. So up there with some of the largest crocodilians like Dinosaurs, Sarcosuchus, and Perusosaurus. So it's pretty interesting. And Gyptosuchus is a type genus of a subfamily of crocodilians called Gyptosaurinine, but these guys may actually be paraphyletic rather than an evolutionary grade towards your typical gharial. Let's all get into. So the type species was discovered in 1912 and was probably destroyed in World War II, but there was another specimen found attributed to that. But there are a few species. The species described as we're talking about here, this is korzatzi, which is found in the upper middle Yurmaco Formation in Venezuela, and can be distinguished by other species by the number of maxillary teeth and things like that. These guys would have been quite huge. The animal's been estimated about 10 meters long, or about 33 feet long, and weighed a little under 2 tons, or about 1,745 kilograms, or 3,847 pounds, and measuring its entire length of its skull, from the end of the rostrum to the suborbital, would result in a much larger size. But there's considerable variation within crocodilians, so this is kind of here or there, but this is a good estimate. But despite this, the species is still considered one of the largest crocodilians to have existed, and maybe indeed actually be the largest graveloid if ever existed, as a recent estimated size for the large Thomistonian Rhamphorhynchus is correct, which may have been 10 meters as well. So another big, large crocodilian, which is pretty cool. So in terms of how it's related, it's in the group Gravealidae, so it's related to the false gharial and the common gharial, or the normal gharial. And you can see this is a model ported from Planet Zoo, so the gharial. And there's been talk about this group, the Gyptosaurine may be paraphyletic, but it may just be how they're related. But there's kind of, how to explain it is kind of, there's the gharial at the top there, and then you have on the other side the false gharial, so they're not that closely related. Gyptosaurus would have been quite in between there, between all these other species of, and genuses of graveloids. That includes Piscogravelus, which was a marine gharial. There's lots of marine gharials. Gharials before today, with it's only those two species around, the gharial and the false gharial, there were a lot more genuses and a lot more different ecologies. They were basically seafaring as well. They were all over the world, which is really, really cool. And these guys would have been in between those kind of those two animals, and really made up the diversity of those really cool animals. In terms of their paleoecology, the Miocene epoch actually represents the only history of these guys in South America, and they would have lived through the Miocene. And there's six other confirmed genera of Gyptosaurine. They were almost certainly the most successful in the Miocene, and they ranged from Venezuela to Argentina during that late Miocene. The dominance is actually likely compared to the one of the two freshwater adapted Gyptosuchines, other than Hesperogavalis. All the rest were actually primarily either estuarine, coastal, or marine. So lots of marine gharials at the time, which is really, really cool. And this potentially gave them an advantage of being successful because these guys could go into the Amazon and be successful. But they would have taken advantage of the swamps and the coastal continental waterways of the Amazon basin. And it's been observed in lots of different areas, things like that. And although Gyptosuchus has been recovered from or reached the Argentina by the Middle Miocene, known species diversity peaked during the late Miocene with about 4 or 5 species present, with 3 of them overlapping in the Eurymacro Formation. And however, during that Miocene-Pliocene boundary, all Graviali and Crocodilia were kind of extirpated from the Miocene. And the kind of endemic caiman, or Caimasaurines, or caimanine, I believe you say that. The group that includes the modern caiman, like the black caiman, spectacle caiman, Cuvier's dwarf caiman, they kind of took over and they took over and a lot of these niches and became the dominant kind of crocodilians in South America. This is believed to be likely due to the continuing elevation of the northern sections of the Andes, which was creating the future Amazon basin, also rerouting drainage flow towards the Caribbean and to the much cooler Atlantic, and transforming a lot of these mega wetlands responsible for this high diversity of crocodilians into like a fully developed riverine drainage system. And that could have really affected a lot of these species, further restricting space and resources and things like that, and may have actually quite well contributed to their extinction. But yeah, still a really, really cool animal. It's nice to see more crocodilians, especially like since a lot of gharials are actually much more marine. We actually had gharials from like islands up until like the Holocene, which was really, really cool, but sadly they went extinct. But yeah, really, really cool animals. I do love crocodiles, and gharials are just so cool. I do love gharials. So let them swim off and do their thing. And last but certainly not least, we've got ourselves a very interesting mammal. This was done by Hyper SGYT. We have got Leviathan, the big sperm whale. See if we can get a good pose to talk to you about him, because this is just such a cool animal. How can you not love Leviathan? So look at you, since you got an interesting pose. Yeah, there we are. So this is Leviathan. Now we'll have a look at... You're kind of at the surface, but we'll talk about you. So this is Leviathan. This is an extinct genus of macroraptorials, so eating large animals. A type of sperm whale that contains one species, Leviathan mavelli. And the genus name was inspired by the biblical monster Leviathan. And the species name was named by Herman Melville, so the author of the famous novel Moby Dick, about a white bull sperm whale attacking him, and we all know that. Really, really cool animal there. Fun fact about these guys, it was first discovered in November 2008, and with a partially preserved skull and also lower jaw, in the Pisco Formation in Peru. And originally was named Leviathan as you would spell it in the Bible, but turns out the Leviathan was actually a genus name for a genus synonym, which is an old genus name for the mastodon, which is mammoth. So because it's already been used, you can't use it anymore. So they renamed it to Leviathan, but it's spelt differently, and still Leviathan mavelli, but it's spelt differently, which is pretty interesting. And these guys, as I mentioned, from the Pisco Formation, so this would have been during the Tenorian stage of the Miocene. So they lived between 9.9 to 8.9 million years ago, so about that 10 million range. Though there have been lots of isolated teeth found in places such as Chile, Argentina, South Africa, and Australia, and imply that either it or a close relative survived up until the Pliocene, so about 5 million years ago, so lived quite a long time. It would have been present throughout the Southern Hemisphere, though we don't, because of like sampling bias, they could have been quite common all over the world. We just haven't found those fossils, which is kind of sad, but really, really interesting. There's been lots of large isolated sperm whale teeth that could belong to the Leviathan or a close relative, found pretty much all over South Africa, Australia, and Argentina, places like that, as I mentioned. In terms of phylogeny, these guys are part of a fossil stem group of hyperpredatory sperm whales, commonly referred to as the macropredatorial or macroraptorial sperm whales, which were included animals such as Brigmophyceta, Acrophyceta, and Zygophyceta, which are groups with large teeth, and we'll get to how large these teeth are, especially the Leviathan, because the Leviathan's a very extreme example. And these guys were kind of not that closely related to modern sperm whales, though they were in that same kind of group of Phytosauria. And these guys are thought to evolve belong to a different lineage that represent the other raptorial sperm whales. So would have been a little bit different, and the large melon would have evolved independently from sperm whales, though they would still both have melons because that's a thing that's basal to sperm whales. And they have some few features that are almost like basilosaur, like common ancestors, things like that, and which is really, really cool. And the appearance of these kind of large raptorial sperm whales coincide with the appearance of a diversification in smaller baleen whales during the Miocene, and it's implying that these guys may have evolved to specifically take advantage of that they would eat many other things, as we'll get onto. And really, really cool animals. Do love the Leviathan, and they would have had these large teeth, as we get into, to kill prey. So the body length and size is unknown because we only really have parts of a preserved skull and teeth found, but as we'll get into, those are both huge. Based on using measurements and body weight measurements from both Zygophyceta and modern sperm whales, there have been estimates between 13 and 17 meters, so about 44 to 57 feet, and estimated about 57 tons compared to modern sperm whales. For comparison, your average modern sperm whale measures about 11 meters for females and 16 for males, or 36 and 52 for males, with some males getting about 20 meters or 68 feet. So they would have been potentially slightly smaller than your modern sperm whales, but still, with the bigger jaws and teeth, I would argue much more dangerous than a modern sperm whale. The large size is also believed to be an anti-predator adaptation, as we'll get into, lived with another really big, large predator that's really famous, and is the largest sperm whale discovered in the fossil record. So in terms of its skull, the holotype skull is about 3 meters long, and similar to other raptorial sperm whales, they have a wide gap within the temporal fossa and the side of the skull, which shows that they had strong jaw muscles to be able to bite. They also had stout and robust jaws to be able to bite things. And along with their teeth as well, unlike modern sperm whales, Leviathan has teeth in both the upper and lower jaw. And these teeth are enormous with these large roots, and would have been able to bite through prey. They have very powerful jaws. And they have a tooth count that was actually lower than those of sperm whales, and the lowest tooth count of... And aside from the modern dwarf and pygmy sperm whales, they have the lowest tooth count of any sperm whale, which is pretty interesting. The most robust teeth are the kind of the fourth, fifth, and sixth teeth on each side of the jaw, and the well-preserved teeth actually have a height greater than 31 centimeters, and the largest holotype is the second or third. Largest teeth in the holotype was the second or third on the left lower jaw, which was calculated to be about 36 centimeters or about a foot high. So that shows you how large they are, and they pretty much have thought to be among the largest teeth known, other than tusks. And some of these larger teeth have been found with the jaws closed, and kind of have these little divots so they can actually close their jaws, which is so impressive for these guys. And they just have giant teeth like a foot long, among the largest, which makes them just so terrifying. And in terms of their hunting as well, as we get into, these guys were apex predators in the ecosystems. They were like the orcas of today. They had a profound impact on these communities. But having these large jaws and strong jaws with these big teeth, they would be pretty much hunting medium-sized baleen whales, but also feeding upon sharks, seals, dolphins, and other large marine vertebrates. They were believed to be occupying a niche with the modern killer whale, quite similar, and they would have been living with the same region as the shark megalodon, and potentially could be both prey and competition for them, or a predator, and they probably were competing a lot over the same food sources. And as it is also assumed that the hunting tactics of Leviathan, if we assume that it's like modern killer whales, they will pursue prey, wear it out, and then drown it. Modern killer whales can also work in groups, but given its size, Leviathan may have hunted alone. But potentially being so big and social, they could have hunted together to hunt megalodons, which is such an interesting fact. And very similar to modern sperm whales, these guys have a large spermaceti organ, which has lots of oils and wax with connective tissue, which allow modern dolphins and Leviathan to have a biosonar. So basically they're allowed to produce sounds, and then the sounds will come back to the air to create almost like a view of the water around it and be able to see animals, things like that. And it's also been hypothesized that they would have used this to also ram prey, or competitors, because modern sperm whales, especially the modern big sperm whales, they will ram each other with their heads and bite each other as well for like dominance displays as well. And even been used against whaling vessels, so they will ram them as well. And another theory as well is that they would also be able to use it as a ranged weapon, so they could create a click so loud and stun prey. And another thing as well is they can alter the temperature of the wax inside their head to aid in buoyancy. And as you lower the temperature, it increases the density and makes it dive down to the deep faster. It's seen in modern sperm whales, though it probably wouldn't be at the same extent as Leviathan, because modern sperm whales are such specialized deep diving animals, which is quite interesting. But fossils of these guys is mentioned to be found pretty much everywhere. They lived during the Miocene. They would feed in all sorts of whales, such as baleen whales, the beaked whales, dolphins, elephant seals, also cartilaginous fish, such as like requiem sharks, mackerel sharks, white sharks, and megalodon, as I mentioned, lived with there. The extinct broad-toothed mako as well. And all of these different habitats would have much more similar animals. Even like the sperm whale found in Australia, they would have been eating animals potentially like whale sharks and Port Jackson sharks. It was found in the same formation. Also megalodons, dugongs, pretty much everything really. And also other formations that be found with Salithoctus, which is a marine sloth, pinnipeds, many other genuses of penguins and gharials, and the extinct traditional great whites, Carcharodon habeli, which is very interesting as well. And they would have just been kind of that big predator, feeding on that seafood diet, eating anything that's marine and anything they can get their mouths around, and potentially even hunting megalodons, which is a really interesting fact. But sadly, they didn't live with us to the modern day, and it's believed to be they went extinct during the early Pliocene because of the cooling trend, which led to the diversity of baleen whales to go down, but their size got larger, so they could go up and swim to the poles and feed on the poles. And they're most likely, with that, they went extinct as well. And another thing is also that could be the extinction that coincides with the emergence of killer whales and other big dolphins, which would potentially have added stress to them. And also megalodon went extinct as well, is that they could be, since these top predators are so much affected by the lower rings, any really big change to the ecosystem can cause them to go extinct pretty quick. Same with Megalodon, and yeah, I just love the idea of having like a movie with a Leviathan, like maybe an old whaling ship gets stuck into a time portal, and then they have to deal with like a pod of Leviathan. Since they're such big predators, they have a ranged weapon. They're already large enough. They're super intelligent. I think that'd be such an interesting movie concept, and Leviathan itself is just such an interesting animal. So yeah, let's see if we can get a look at those big teeth, and then I think we can end the video. So let's see if we can get it. Nice big video. Open its mouth. I think we need to duck in like this a little bit more. Get a good picture of its teeth. But yeah, like most modern whales, that they obviously would have their mouth closed most of the time like this. These big lips. Let's see if we can find something. I think this is just a really wonderful model. Hyper JWE2 did an actually really great job. Especially with considering how most of the other animals in the game would swim around side to side. They managed to get that up and down motion from the Kronosaurus pretty well, which is awesome. I know they're going to bare our teeth for us, but really, really awesome animal. I do love the Leviathan. So, yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.